All right, welcome everybody. This is 1 Million Cups. Wait, who is here for the first time? Welcome, thanks for coming. Brand new. And who's been here since before we were in this room? All right, that's a lot. Thanks for coming. This is 1 Million Cups. It's a weekly educational program where we have two entrepreneurs come up on the stage. They say some stuff for about 6 minutes, and then then we ask them questions and make them uncomfortable and make them sweat because you ask them really good, tough questions. I'm Toby, and this is Brian, Milton, and we're missing one, but she'll be back next week, we think. So also, before we get started, we wanted to just make sure that we welcome the Fast Track folks, facilitators. Thanks for coming, being here. Do you want to stand up and do some jumping jacks, or like you've been working all morning, so we'll get you to do some calisthenics later. I want to introduce our panel, or have the panel introduce themselves. So during the questions, they'll have, after the questions, they'll ask the first few questions after the presentation. Take a minute and do a quick intro.
Good morning, my name is Mary Moeller. I own two companies. I'm author of 5 published books. My companies are StarTech Express, which is a website development company for small businesses, so we keep the prices down. And StarTech is my other company, and that is a web development company, a specialized web and application development company.
Morning, I'm Jeff Shackelford. I run a program called the Digital Sandbox Proof of Concept Center. Hopefully all of you have heard about it. We help early stage entrepreneurs move from concept to working prototype to hopefully raise some money, get in business, and hire people. So my only suggestion is, instead of a football this morning, we should have a baseball, because who saw the 3-0 win that we had last night, huh? People get injured, people go away, doesn't matter, we just keep winning. So Mr. Kaufman is smiling.
Thank you, Jeff. Before we get started with our first presenter, we want to just play a really quick video about our 1 in a Million competition.
We're looking for 1 in a million. What does 1 in a million look like? Have you ever seen it? Does it look like this? Or this? If you've ever presented at a 1 Million Cups gathering held every week in more than 70 locations across the country, then maybe 1 in a million looks like you. This year, for the first time ever, open exclusively for 1 Million Cups entrepreneurs, the 1 in a Million Startup Showdown will be a featured event during Global Entrepreneurship Week. 1 in a Million was created to provide educational resources to entrepreneurs and showcase some of the stellar startups in the 1 Million Cups community. 15 finalists will be selected to come to the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation in Kansas City on November 17th and 18th, where they will receive coaching and gain valuable insights to sharpen their startups. The top 5 startups will be selected to take the stage for a first-of-its-kind Wednesday morning presentation that will be streamed live to all 1 Million Cup sites across the country. The winning startup takes home $10,000. Here's what you need to know. Your startup must have presented at a 1 Million Cups before August 2nd, 2015. Your startup must be younger than 5 years old and based in the United States. Your startup should have plans to grow with a scalable and disruptive business model. Don't wait to submit your company for this nationwide competition. 1 in a Million will accept applications through August 7th. That's it. Actually, there's more to it than that, so visit us on the web to learn more about how your startup can become 1 in a million.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Milton. All right, so our first presenter is Edge Up Sports. I'm going to make you raise your hand again. Who here knows Ilya? Excellent. So there you go.
Oh, nice. I feel like I start every presentation or video with catching a football, so I'm glad that I still have soft hands. Yeah, so thanks for coming this morning, and I appreciate the time. My name is Ilya Tabak, and I'm the CEO of Edge Up Sports. And this morning I'm going to tell you a little bit about how my team and I are making fantasy football fun again and some of the cool plans we have for this upcoming season. So let's talk about Sunday in America in September and October, November. What do Americans do? Well, okay, we have one watch football. Yes, they do a couple of different things. They don't only watch football, but they definitely do watch football. And it's actually been America's sport for more than 20 years, America's favorite sport. More recently, people are are playing fantasy football more and more. And so that's becoming almost like a digital American pastime. How many of you play fantasy football in this room? Okay, so not too many. How many people, if you didn't raise your hand, know somebody that's played, or a neighbor, a coworker? That's a lot more people. That's about half the room maybe. So for those of you that raised your hand, you probably know somebody like this that takes it kind of seriously. Or not. It's actually funny or quiet.
That was literally just a game.
Let's do that one more time.
I don't get what the big deal is. It's just a game.
Just a game? Just a game? Was World War II just a game? Was the moon just a game?
That's a satellite.
Was the first Super Bowl just a game?
That was literally just a game.
So this kind of passion, this buy-in, this kind of activity around the sport is really helping to drive really an explosion in the space. The fantasy football market is growing by more than $100 million per season, and new users are flocking to the new digital pastime. And it's a big deal. There's not a lot of things in the US where we can get more than a third of the US adult population engaged and more than 10% actually playing. And what we're looking to do this season is help some of the casual players and some of the new players save time, organize that experience and information, and really return to the things that are fun. And so our focus is to really focus on the things that people join fantasy football to do, which is to have fun, talk a little trash, and be competitive. And by focusing on experience, we're going to be able to do that. The traditional fantasy football player really goes out there, Googles stuff, reads analysis, maybe watches some SportsCenter. We're not proposing to take away the things that people enjoy, but we're proposing to really combine and aggregate many of these disconnected points and save them some of the 2 to 10 hours that they're spending getting ready for their fantasy football week. Further, we're looking at some things that aren't traditionally accessible as people get prepared for their weekly matchup. One of these is a behavioral radar. So we're looking at data points that are actually generated by the players. So I'm sure you guys are all tweeting and doing all kinds of stuff. There's a lot of information that's out there generated by people directly. And we're starting to look initially at Twitter, but also looking at other signals that are indications of the players' performance that are generated themselves and bringing that as a data point. The other thing that takes a lot of time in getting ready for your fantasy week is actually looking at all of the analysis of sports. One of the most time-consuming things is actually seeing what is happening that's important to me. So if I have a matchup and my quarterback is starting against a really, really tough pass rush, for example, I might want to know that. And so to get out there, read the analysis, what's the defense doing, either requires a lot of time or requires some computing and processing. And one of the things that we've done that's very exciting is started to look at, and we'll deliver this season, a tool that looks at what is the sentiment of the analysts and kind of the general media, and how is that directed actually to your roster. And so instead of just looking at information where there's 10 players managed, we've actually taken some computing tools and looked at how is that tone and voice directed at my players so I can have that information in kind of a one-stop shop analytical platform. We're using some cutting-edge tools to do that, but I'm not going to spend too much time on this part. The thing that we're really focused on is that we want to deliver the cleanest experience that changes the way that you interact around information that surrounds the league. And so instead of going out there and doing the busy work yourself, we're trying to make you into more of a head coach, somebody that makes the decisions, as opposed to somebody that spends time really going through all this information. Now, we're not trying to take away your SportsCenter. If you like watching SportsCenter, do that, that's great, but we're really trying to take out a lot of the busy work that you don't enjoy. And this is really only the beginning. There's a lot of other data points. As I'm talking to you right now, I'm seeing a lot of things about who's paying attention, who's not. There's a lot of other information that's being relayed by players as they play, videos becoming available. And so this is really the first step on a journey of us taking a lot of data and making that accessible in a fun way. We have an awesome team to do this. We have kind of a mixed group. Many of you are here today. You can come stop them and ask, how cool the company is and some of the things that they're doing. They're kind of sitting back there. But we'll be able to deliver on a lot of these things because of deep operations, legal, as well as a technical background, which is very interesting. As I mentioned, we're looking to go mobile first to the casual player for the first year. So our real focus is saving people time and giving them enough context and comfort level to play in a league where they may not have played a lot, or it may even be their first year. And then over the next couple seasons, we'll actually access a larger cross-section of the market. And so we're really excited to get out there and get our founding team of users and deliver an awesome experience to allow people to have fun, talk a little smack, and win their league. Now, building a company can be, and so research players, kind of the roster process, as well as save time. But ultimately, building a company can be pretty hard work, but we've been having a pretty good time at it. So thanks a lot for your attention. I'm happy to dig in and answer some questions and, maybe get a couple tweets from the folks in the audience.
All right, we'll open the questions with a couple questions from the panel.
Yeah, so, and I promise I'll be nice. So,
Okay.
So from the Shark Tank world, show me the money. How do you make any money with this thing?
Sure, yeah. So the average fantasy football player spends over $100 on a season, 40-some dollars on kind of magazines, research, that kind of thing. If you include daily in that number, so you probably heard recently that Yahoo made an announcement that they're starting fantasy sports. If you haven't, that's a huge announcement. It's one of the first major platforms to actually get into the daily game. Those players are averaging $470 a season. Much of that is kind of betting activity and things like that, but there's very real money being spent by these 33 million people. And so what we're doing is we're cleaning up kind of the social experience, and we're going software as a service directly to consumer. And so we charge a seasonal fee for the first season, and then we're still working out kind of the monthly or weekly pricing model to where it makes sense. And there's some interesting dynamics in football where, everybody's excited early on, then some people drop off. And so kind of balancing that out is going to be interesting. But for the first season, we're really looking to build with an engaged, strong user base to deliver these ultimate tools for the people that are used to having kind of automation in their life and bringing that to fantasy football for them.
So then, kind of back to the Yahoo jumping into the daily stuff.
Yep.
Any thoughts of white label or licensing your technology to somebody who can go find the 20 million people who are going to play?
Sure. So the first part, kind of our first focus, is direct to consumer and really delivering rich experience. As part of that, we're continuing to build one of the richer computational landscapes around the NFL. As I mentioned, we're starting to look at data points that are generated by the players, obviously looking at the statistics, but there's already some good work there. And then there's a bunch of things going around the social sphere and other places. And so as we deliver experience to our customers, we're building a rich landscape that we can start and continue to really derive both algorithms and analytics, as well as maybe understand that casual segment, which, the new players, there's about 4 million this year, probably 5 million next year. And so both on the experience side as well as the analytics side, we have an opportunity to then go to some of the established platforms and do a couple other things in subsequent seasons.
You've presented before, haven't you? You do a great job.
Thank you.
Yeah, very good job. I had a couple of questions. One of the things with your website I was looking through, and of course that's what my specialty is,
Sure.
Have you thought about engaging your customers online a little bit more? As I see it right now, the pronouns are we and I and that type of thing, as opposed to putting it out there, you, this is what your experience will be, or can you imagine you doing this or that? Have you thought about that side of it?
We have, some of which I'll touch on and other which I'll ask for a little, wait and see for a couple of weeks. But yeah, I mean, really, our whole goal is to build with our audience. We kind of see the opportunity here as any modern kind of software company is to really deliver an awesome software product. And that's one of the things that's actually lacking in fantasy football generally, is if you go to a major platform, they roll out a set of features, and they say, this is what you're going to get this season. And you're like, wow, this is kind of cool, but I sort of want this thing, right? And it's not very conversational. And so part of the reason why we say we is that we're thinking of kind of our founding user base and us as the team, right? And especially for the first season, continuing to push features through the season and really being very conversational. And there's some cool features that we're considering, but we actually kind of want to engage in a give and take with our initial team to kind of prioritize that and deliver. And so as any modern kind of software platform, we actually intend to push features. And so when we say we, we're not talking about we, EdgeUp Sports, we're talking about EdgeUp Sports and our founding user group.
So you might want to bring in the conversation on your website so that it reflects that. But it's a great website. I mean, very, very nice website, and your presentation is very good. So I want to take it just a little bit further with the financial projections.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit more about how you are actually marketing.
Sure. So most of our demographic is online. Our approach is mobile first. Everybody's got a modern smartphone. And so it's kind of a combination of PR, earned media, and paid media. And some announcements coming soon on how we intend to engage in an interesting way with the customers directly as well. Ultimately, it's understanding kind of where the slightly younger tech-forward user base lives and kind of where that intersection is with sports and fantasy football. And then engaging both in some of the online communities as well as targeting and retargeting online for making sure that we're getting in front of kind of people that are in a really good place to be part of our initial founding team.
Okay, sounds good. And one last thing, are you guys thinking about having like eventually like a national tournament or something that will get you out there even further as far as this being like a big thing for people to be involved in and to become involved in?
Yeah, so what our platform does now, and the focus is to be a supplemental tool that allows you to bring in the rosters that you've built on a couple of the major platforms and then have a one-stop shop for all the data points that we're bringing together. There's some opportunities to do some interesting things. One of the things that we're doing that's along this line is we're actually planning a Madden video game tournament. And so there's some interesting kind of intersections between video gaming, technology, sports, where we think we get some pretty interesting interaction. And so you'll be hearing more about that shortly as well.
All right, let's open it up to the audience for some questions. Before we get going, anybody that's standing up in the back, let's see if you can kind of filter in and find a seat. Don't be shy about walking down the aisles. There's plenty of places to sit. All right, anybody have a...
Lots of seats.
Lots of
through
seats.
this area.
Here's the first question in the middle, Ilya.
Thank you so much. All right, Ilya, fantastic presentation. One of the thoughts that ran through my mind while through this presentation is, what is your media plan like, especially with the radio, like Radio App? I can definitely think that 610s, the drive, and the day shift audiences would be extremely beneficial for that. Have you guys thought through on how you do radio and also how to expand on your social media?
We have, and you're going to see at least parts of the social media side come online here in the next couple weeks. So I guess the other point that some of you may not be aware is that the football season moves for nobody. And so we have a very, very kind of clean target where there is a preseason dynamic and then a regular dynamic. So we've been very focused on building product and actually delivering it to the marketplace. But as we're ready to roll out, and this is part of that, we're reaching out on social media. We're also kind of starting to execute on a broader media plan as well. Radio has not been a significant part of that, but it's definitely something we've thought about. Our kind of trick and focus, really the thing that we want to do for the first season, is engage with a very specific demographic cross-section to get rich feedback both from the sports experience side as well as the technology side. And so we're being somewhat careful in how we target and reach out. But I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on what you think kind of the radio side of that might look like.
Another one in the middle, Ilya.
Two questions. how do you define your business? Is it a search engine? Is it a data service provider? Question two, who are your competitors?
Yeah, so we're probably more of a research engine right now, but we're heading and kind of looking at what are the interesting analytics that we can generate. So the reason I say that is there's two problems here. One is that the space of information around the league is pretty disconnected and distributed all over the place. And so by being able to deliver these analytics, we have to go out and get it in a lot of different places, right? And so our initial focus is cleaning that up, doing a lot of the busy work, and then presenting it in an insightful way to our users. As we make progress in that space and to launch really for this season, we now have the opportunity to roll out a lot of analytics and do some work there. So analytics first, or data aggregation kind of experience first, kind of a insights provider, and then as we bring more and more signals online, we have an opportunity to provide some interesting proprietary insights as well. Competitors, there's some very interesting stuff going on in the statistics space. So there's a company called Numberfire that does a lot of interesting statistical matchups. Generally, in a more wide view, there's also a lot of analysis and folks writing about what's the matchup, how's my player going to do, and right now that's a competitive product as well, because fantasy football players are actually using that to research what they're going to do. And so lots of insights are kind of text-based out online and even video-based through SportsCenter and things like that. And so there's a number of software kind of projection type platforms that are maybe more direct technical competitors, but there's also a lot of shows, content analysis, and that kind of thing, which is an indirect competitor.
Question for you here, Ilya.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about the specific tools you use to do like your market research. You touched a little bit on it in your presentation on the market segments.
Yeah.
One of the things we found is like most presenters that come up and present, one of their weakest areas is how did they identify their market? So I'm wondering if you can kind of expound a little bit. You seem to have a good grasp on that.
Sure.
How you did it.
Yeah, I've been assisted greatly by the fact that it's a 33 million person market. I think fantasy sports is a 57 million person market, and 75% of that is the NFL. So there's actually been a lot of good research and targeting. And then we've done some tactical things to actually reach out. During the last Super Bowl, we ran some targeted ads and started looking at how can we actually connect people that have some of the demographic signals that we're interested in. And so we tested a couple of the things that were out there in industry reports, in analyst reports. People have been watching the space pretty carefully. There's also about $1 billion in sports tech VC, and so there's a lot of activity, and anytime that there's a lot of activity, there's a lot of information out there. And so a lot of it is kind of a combination of industry analysis, looking at what are the general trends, and then specifically targeted at football because football is such a big cross-section of the fantasy sports market. And then we've done a little bit of poking on ourselves to see kind of how real are some of these things.
Question in the center.
David Levitt, quick question for you. NFL football is a very American sport.
Yep.
And it's a very seasonal sport.
Yep.
Do you have scalability to other sports, say soccer over in Europe, other times of the year, baseball, where you can take this platform and then scale it so you have a full year revenue model versus a single season revenue model?
Sure, we do. There's definitely applicability, but one of the things that we're focusing on is really going deep as opposed to wide. Football represents, as I said, 75% of the activity in fantasy sports. If you then look at the media market on top of football, it's the richest media market in the world for sports. That's actually reflected in user activity, so when people are buying research and things like that. And so in the off season, there's a lot of interesting kind of B2B as well as B2Team opportunities. And so our off season gives us two things. One is an opportunity to prepare for the next season. And then the other one is to help some of our business partners and things like that step up their game, right? And so we can have a continuous model and still be delivering on the platform by focusing on football, at least for the next couple of years. There's definitely applicability, but as you look at football, there's 300, 500 players that matter, and so by going out there, aggregating those data sources and cleaning that up and focusing, you have a lot of value that you can add into a huge marketplace. And so we're kind of focused on football for now, but there's definitely applicability for some of the algorithms that we come up with, and as that becomes kind of more of an interesting play, we can definitely look at other sports and adjacent markets.
Question here in the front.
Ilya, do you have much subliminal suggestion to get them addicted and coming back over and over?
So we don't want to be manipulative. There's definitely a lot of work that's been done on how do you make an app interesting and engaging. So maybe less subliminal, less manipulative, but how do you actually make it add value to somebody's life, right? The idea is, and really why we're super excited about getting out with our founding base of users, is we can have that in a conversational way, right? What would add value to your fantasy week? Like, how would your Wednesdays or your Saturdays be more fun and easier, right? And we can have that conversation and really deliver that value. And one of the things that makes apps sticky, interesting, platforms useful is that they add information about what you need in a way that you can understand it, where you want it. And we're kind of going for all of those things. And so hopefully we won't have to do anything subliminal. We could just have the conversation and be like, what would make you love our platform more, and then deliver that.
Ilya, right here in the middle. Can you speak a little bit to your journey up to this point? So
yeah.
How do you get from where all the different things that you do to this particular launch, this particular thing?
Yeah, sure. So my journey, it's definitely been an interesting journey. I've been very interested in kind of effective and physiological computing. So computing that kind of understands humans a little bit better. And kind of did some consulting and work in that space in a couple different industries. Made a movie with some friends, and they asked me a pretty interesting question, and so started thinking about that in a pretty deep way. And then as I kind of got out there, I met an awesome crew of people that were able to bring interesting skill sets and perspectives and kind of a different tool to ultimately the platform that we're building now. And so with kind of focus on kind of the data science, the infrastructure side, as well as how can you actually make this a business and how can you make awesome digital products, we've been able to put together a pretty interesting approach. And so I would say it's kind of a combination of a continued interest over a period of years now, as well as kind of a cool startup community, which wasn't always that way. And so that's kind of how I got here.
Question to your left.
Hi, Ilya. I'm excited to try out your product here coming in the football season, but I'm a casual guy.
Good.
So I probably spend $20, maybe, and maybe that's why I never win. But I'm thinking about the buddies that I play with in the mini leagues that they're in, and they're the die-hard guys. And one of your slides showed the demographic or your population that you were going after first.
Yep.
Yeah, that's from the casual players, new players, die-hard players. I feel like if I'm going to use your product, I'll get excited about the new information, but I probably am still not willing to spend a whole lot. But I know my buddies are, and they'll spend whatever it takes to win that league and so they don't have to get tattooed or whatever it is, you know? So I just want you to explain why you decided to go after the casual players instead of the die-hard players up front.
Sure, yeah. So kind of one of the dynamics that we've seen is the casual player that's embedded in the die-hard league. And so that's where you get into some of the smack talking and some of these other things, especially if you don't know football well. And to your point, how much time do you spend? Yeah. Right. And so that's kind of what we're banking on, is that time and what else could you do with that, right? And really the conversation is about, you know, if you like spending the 5-6 hours and you like kind of searching for the analyst that's your favorite, then great, you're already doing it right. Right? But if you're looking at kind of a little bit more context and information, and especially they finally let you into the league that you've been waiting to play in for 5 years, and you want to kind of show that, yeah, I can keep up with these guys, that's kind of the thing. And there's a lot of people that just don't have a deep knowledge of football, kind of a deep perspective of, you know, Jamal Charles's injuries over the last, 4 years, let's say, right? If you don't know that he blew out his ACL, that may be like a thing that's important when he gets tackled on the lower knee. Right? And that's kind of the information that we want to bring to you without you spending the time to do it. And so that's kind of casual players, but really casual players that don't have enough context to engage in some of the smack talk and can't really start with the information landscape, because that really gives them a lot of value, because all of a sudden they're in there and they're pissing off their buddies that have been keeping them out of their league. And the thing is, there's 10 million of those, and we're really going for a small percentage initially.
Oh yeah, we're going to have to stop here. Thank you for all that information. But before I let you go, what can we as a community do for you?
Everybody's got a smartphone. If you guys can go on the website and sign up for the list, we'd love it. We're going to ask for and do a couple of very interesting things here over the next weeks, really. So if you guys stay in touch with us, that'd be amazing. And then there's a tweet or two out there. If you can retweet, that will do it as well. And would love to keep the conversation going. And if some of you are part of our initial founding user team, looking forward to being in kind of close touch with you soon. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much. Is Eric Nichols with Verizon here? Okay, come on up. You're gonna do a quick announcement. On the back of your weekly sheet, there's some information about what Eric's gonna tell you about.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Everybody's all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. It's a really exciting chance to talk about the Verizon IoT Developer Workshop, August 11th, right down the street here in Kansas City at our friends at Think Big Partners. It is going to be free to attend. We just ask that you register. It will be very, very hardware-centric. If you have any questions, I'll be right back here in the back of the room. I'll have the invitation. I'll have my card. That's it. Nice, short, and sweet. If you guys like to come, just stop by, and I'd like to extend the invitation to you guys. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much. If you were invited to join the Mug Club, come on up. This is your chance to say hello. So I've got three veterans here. Go ahead, Andy.
What am I saying?
Say your name, why you like 1 Million Cups, and
Andy Talbert with Snow and Company, and we actually presented, I think, like almost 3 years ago at this point. So it's been a long time. So it's been exciting to see how 1 Million Cups has grown, and it's been great for our business concept in the bar restaurant industry. I think the Business Journal once ran a piece on us being kind of the living room of entrepreneurs, and a lot of entrepreneurs are here as well, obviously. So.
Hi, I'm Laura Artman. I moved to Kansas City a year ago, and I've been coming to 1 Million Cups. Met Brian, he invited me, and I'm just here to learn about entrepreneurship as a future entrepreneur. And my background's in fashion and hospitality, but I'm sort of working my way into the design world, studying graphic design at Kansas City Art Institute. So that's me, and nice to see you all.
Great, great.
Hi, my name's Todd Haneysh. I work with 4redox.com, the most important advancement in health ever. I love coming to 1 Million Cups. I grew up in an entrepreneurial household. My mother was actually Mr. Kaufman's travel agent, and she built a business to over 20 million. She was able to keep his business because of her futuristic nature of always taking the newest technology and engaging it. And it's very difficult to find a room of people that think in terms of possibilities. Only 17% of people can actually find out due diligence and think. And I love coming here because I'm like a sponge to possibilities.
Thank you, Todd. There you go. Great. And who is here for the first time? Somebody raise your hand if you're here for the first time. Okay. You're saying no, and you've raised your hand. Okay, so what's your name?
Hello, my name is Koya.
What brings you out?
I'm actually with the Summer at the Fed program at the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City. And we've been talking a lot about entrepreneurship, and this was a great opportunity for us to actually see people taking their dreams and making them a reality.
Great. Okay, so this is what you have to aspire to, but this is what I have for you today. This is a travel mug insulator. All right, let's get going to our next. Let's get going. We've got Kid Rocket Studio here. We've got John and Jason. Guys, come on up. They are definitely showing some merch here. I'm very impressed.
What are you going to do, you know?
Please
Gotta represent.
show us the back at some point during your presentation. Okay, let's hear it for John and Jason from Kid Rocket.
Thank you. It's fun to be following up something like fantasy sports because the world that we play in is also fantasy, but it's pure fantasy. Kid Rocket Studios is a creative studio that we founded that develops children's branded entertainment and brings that to life for traditional digital and emerging media distribution channels. Now, it sounds like a lot of wonk wonk, and it doesn't sound like very kid-friendly, but there really is a place for this here right now, and we're going to go into a little bit about that. The studio itself has been around for about a year. We are based here in Kansas City, and we're an incubated startup within the walls of Propaganda 3, which is a digital development company now located in the Crossroads. The story of Kid Rocket Studios, though, goes back even further than that, and it really is the story of Jason Bays and this fantastical sort of world that he created in his mind. The idea is about 10 or 11 years old. The concept of it, though, goes back even further than that. Much of what we see today in children's entertainment has the tendency to be provocative, perhaps to be a little bit more mature than what we remember as kids. And we always hear the kids these days kind of with a, sort of a desperate sigh of what's happening. What we have here with Kung Fu Robot, a 9-foot-tall, red Kung Fu fighting robot, his 9-year-old conscientious sidekick named Marvin, is really a throwback to a more innocent time of storytelling for kids. When Jason had this idea about 10, 11 years ago, he brought this to life, and this is great because I get to tell Jason's story, because Jason's the storyteller usually. When he brought this to life, he started refining the idea over a series of years, getting to the point of actually taking this concept and bringing it to traditional book publishers, children's publishers. And how many different publishers' doors did you knock on?
About 18. So, 18? Yeah.
18 different publishers, and getting almost to the point of, profit and loss statements and calculations and, can the story move in this direction? Can it move in that direction? Can Kung Fu Robot be a little bit more red? Those types of conversations, all the way to the point where they just weren't sure if they really wanted to take the risk. So over this 10-year period, as he's going and knocking on doors, something really interesting starts to happen. And that's when he starts to realize that there's digital implications and there's the potential to actually bring this to market in a very different way. 2010, the iPad comes out, and all of a sudden the light bulb kind of goes on and says, maybe there's another way to do this. There's another channel that's available. The democratization of the tools and the technology. For $99, you can become a certified Apple developer. For however much money, you can grab Adobe Creative Suite, and you can really start to bring these things to life in a very different way that bypasses the traditional gatekeepers within the industry. So with this idea, he then approached Propaganda 3. The idea started to take shape, and how to format a interactive children's book in a very different way. So that's the genesis of Kid Rocket Studios, and truly the genesis of Kung Fu Robot, who was released, born, if you will, officially in May of 2013. So you can see it's a very serious story that involves peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, ninjas, kung fu fighting, and the evil nemesis Kung Pao Chicken. You're following along here. Kids?
Intellectual.
Yeah, it's pretty high. It's pretty high level stuff. We weren't exactly sure what was going to happen. So we released this out into the world. It's a different experience. It's not a game. It's not a pure ebook. It's somewhere in between. We have a swipe and style comic book reading format. We have games to kind of break up the reading experience. We didn't know it was going to happen. About 2 days, or a day or 2 days after we released the app in May of 2013, we saw this really nice blog post very quickly called the app Marvelous, which was awesome. And it was from the UK, so they spelled Marvelous with 2 L's, which makes it even more marvelous, I think. And it was a glowing review, and he had done this video, looking through the app, and he was talking about all the different things he used, loving the jokes and the style and all this. And we thought, wow, that's really awesome. That's more than what we would expect. And we hadn't even started the PR process yet. We had social media locked and loaded, press releases locked and loaded, ready to get out the door. He beat us to the punch. What we found out later was the writer who put a review on his and his wife's children's app review blog turned out to be Stuart Dredge, who is one of the leading tech writers for The Guardian in the UK. About 2 days later, he then puts us into an article about the 20 best iPhone, iPad apps for the week. And a rocket launch, for lack of a better term. A lot of different reviews start coming in. We start kicking up the PR machine, and we start getting the word out, and we just see downloads happening and happening and happening. And I think it was probably a pretty interesting experience for Jason.
Yeah, it was supposed to be a soft release, and then it was. So I found out it was actually had been approved for release when he had posted his review with the video and everything. So we had 20,000 downloads.
In the first couple of weeks, about 20,000 downloads. What ended up happening is we find ourselves on the iTunes top 10 list, or top 25 list, number 3 behind iBooks and Kindle, and 1 slot before the Nook, which is really fascinating because those aren't books, those are readers. We're sitting here in front of properties like Sesame Street and all these different things. Parents Magazine, later that fall, writes us up as one of the best children's apps for the year. Apple even starts to take notice of us when we start to release these updates. So we serialize the content and the updates. So Apple starts to put us up into rotation. So we're sitting there next to Eric Carle when we release Volume 2, sitting next to Disney's Frozen Karaoke, which as a parent, I can't think of a more scary app. But we're in great company there, and it's an amazing feeling to be there. So we're sitting there with Volume 3 and in that spot. And today, we're sitting at about 418,000 downloads. The majority of those in the United States, a surprising amount in China. It's not localized, it's not language localized, so it's all in English, the mainline app. So that was an interesting one. We also had some reviews in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, and so we had seen some great traction there. The download types, about 60% of them are regular downloads, but we also see about 40% of our downloads coming from this promotional category, which basically means that educational institutions are downloading the app and then installing them across the user base. So whether it's school districts, universities, unfortunately, we don't get the level of analytics that we want. Apple is very closely guarded with that sort of stuff. I'd love to know more about that particular audience, but it's certainly helped our efforts in getting exposure. About the demographics, because the beautiful thing about it is you got demographics within, that you can start to track with the interactivity of it. 68% female audience, 32% male. Age distribution, you kind of start to scratch your head. All right, 25 to 34, 34 to 54. We quickly realized that we're installed on mom's iPad. It's what she's carved out that little bit of space for the kids, whether you're driving down the road or you're going through the shopping mall or the grocery store, and the iPad becomes the opportunity for the child just to have something to do. And then with session lengths, and what we're also tracking is we're seeing engagement within the app to the level that we know people are returning to it, we know kids are reading it and enjoying it. There's a lot of different things that are going on with this, but Kid Rocket Studio isn't just about Kung Fu Robot. We have a mission here, which is really about launching imaginations. There's so many different opportunities here to engage children these days. There's a lot of new ways that kids can be engaged, and honestly, the traditional gatekeepers don't know how to deal with digital media. And they haven't fully embraced digital media as the test bed it could be for ideas, mechanics, properties, potential franchises. For whatever reason, I've talked to book publishers, a lot of the publishers here in town, out of town. We've been approached as a studio from content creators and movie studios who've seen our app and they want us to do work for them. They can't figure out the monetization strategy. These are people who have been doing children's content for a long time. What they're looking for, and I think what we are trying to prove, is that we have a validation model here for properties. That we can launch ideas into the ether and find an established platform that actually makes it easier for these companies to take a flyer. You're not just betting on a 9-foot-tall red robot presented by a very nice gentleman who's going to come to your door and tell you about all the wonderful things and show you some great artwork. We're going to do that again. We're going to go through that process again, but with the validation of 418,000 users worldwide. It's a different pitch. It changes the game. So we see, again, it's not just about app development. It's about ideas. There's books, there's animation, there's toys, opportunity to do games and different products. That is the model of the studio. That is what we serve as a test bed, and we're putting our own products out there in the marketplace. So Kung Fu Robot is the first one, the major one. We are getting ready to release the final update of this first story arc here in probably about the next month. And we're really excited to see where that goes. We have a complete story rather than a serialized story that we've told over the last year or so. We have a localized version of the first chapter, or first 3 chapters that we did in Spanish, and we released out there as a test. We wanted to see how that would work and see what the different dynamics of non-US based marketplaces. We released it out to Spanish-speaking countries first before we brought it into the US. We just wanted to see where things were going. If I had to do it over again, I probably should have done it in Chinese. Pocket Sitcom is just a simple soundboard app that you pull out and you can play sounds on there. If you haven't ever watched a kid play with their toys, they are the masters at making up sounds. Or if you've ever watched a Lego stop motion video, they're always trying to figure out ways to add sounds to their playtime. So this was something that we just kind of had out there using sounds from classic TV shows. Image Scrimmage is a photo-based scavenger hunt. So taking it away from the sort of property play and moving more into a mechanic play. The idea that you can be in a grocery store, pull up Image Scrimmage, and you have a way of keeping your kids or keeping your family entertained in probably the most mundane circumstances. I think my wife actually used this at the DMV one time, which is really interesting when you have your kids running around taking pictures of people at the DMV. But it was an interesting mechanic there. And then we have another one that we're working on in conjunction, a variation off of Image Scrimmage that we'll be launching here with the Kansas City Irish Fest in September. Both those concepts is really interesting because we worked with a large creative company here in Kansas City to develop those ideas, to develop those artwork, and to advise on the marketing and release of those. So there's the opportunity for a large company to sit there and validate an idea with a small budget play.
John, I don't want to run out of time for questions to you.
Your timing is perfect.
Do you have, you're good?
Your timing is absolutely perfect.
All right, okay. So I want to start off with Mary on the panel. Go ahead, Mary.
Thank you. Great product, great presentation. You guys did a great job. I like your website. I like all of the animation, everything that you've had up there. I have a couple of questions for you. Number one, what is the marketplace as far as how are you making your money with this?
At this time, I think as a lot of folks who've been through here and stood on the stage, monetization, in-app monetization is a very difficult road. The marketplace isn't necessarily the 99 cents to $1.99 play. That's not necessarily the road to riches. The monetization, I think, for this is really about property rights and intellectual property play. And that's where we're putting the majority of our efforts right now. Whether that is an idea or a property like Kung Fu Robot that we bring up in the studio, or if it's working with an outside partner, we believe that that test bed sort of scenario that we've created here allows it really has the opportunity to blossom. We don't want to be a service company. We don't want to be making kids apps like, we've had those calls and it's just not where our focus is. So for us, it's about the grassroots development of ideas and properties and characters.
My second question relates more to, we all know that kids now are very unhealthy because of sitting in front of computers and not getting the exercise they need. Have you ever thought of combining this with some type of physical activity as opposed to just sitting in front of the computer or in front of the iPad or in front of the phone or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to what we're focusing on is the story and where that story is in the intersection of mediums and how kids interact with it. So it's really trying to create more of an immersive storytelling for the kids using all these different either technology or traditional mediums, and just how to get them to kind of emulate and interact with these stories, you know. So that's really where it's at. So I would love to get kids thinking about it and then taking it away from the computer and then taking it out into the real world and not sitting in front of the computer so much, but, you know.
And I think that's where image scrimmage starts to play in there. The idea that the way that the app is built is certain prompts in certain situations. So if there's actually they have a grocery store scrimmage in there. So the idea is to find a photo and take a photo of holding up a grocery store bag, or go find a display of vegetables and get a picture of yourself in front of that display of vegetables. So you're creating a digital experience, but you physically have to be moving around and engaging. And especially in a place where there's not a lot of fun to be had in a grocery store for kids unless you're going down the cereal aisle. So we want to try to find some other ways to do that. So there's definitely that idea of how technology can enhance or change a mundane everyday experience and bring some physical activity into play.
So I understand you do work for others, or are you just interested in cranking out your own?
We do work for others. I think the opportunity for the studio is for folks who don't necessarily, content creators who don't necessarily want to put themselves out there, or where the overarching brand of that may not be believable in that particular space. We've started to carve out a place where imagination and play can be believable, especially with a digital bent to it. By being a startup, by doing these different things, we can take on some of that work. I don't think that's necessarily the prime. I think that's great for short-term or medium-term revenue. I don't think that's the long-term place where we want to play. I think the long-term place, and where, frankly, the dollars are, is in property development and those intellectual property rights. You can look at something like Monster High. Mattel creates Monster High because they have to spend millions of dollars for the rights to Marvel and DC and anything else out there. Monster High was created in-house. They hold all those property rights, and as a result, they completely flip that model. Rather than for them paying, plus taking the risk on manufacturing, plus then dealing with distribution, they get to be in that seat and they get to change everything over.
I'm going to turn it back so these guys have some time to ask.
A quick question about Kung Pao chicken. Does he go around spreading salmonella or something?
Well, yeah, he's a little misguided nemesis in all of it. So
Fun. Okay. Yeah. Congratulations. All right. Who's got a question?
You don't want to kiss him, though.
Who's got a real question? Okay.
All right. Two things. First is education. Have you ever thought about partnering up with the education piece of it to have Kung Fu Robot be the to solidify maybe some primary educational?
Yeah, I think we've played around with it. I mean, the initial idea was just something fun for a fun story for kids. And I started out with really kind of taking something as simple everyday activity for kids like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and trying to get a fun story and an interaction with them to kind of get kids thinking about just having fun with everyday things. So it was less about education and just kind of getting kids to kind of invest in just the simple things that they do, and do on their own and to have fun.
When we look at that overall mission of the studio, I think there's the opportunity to, maybe not necessarily in this particular story, but to certainly with kids, to inspire creativity. And those are things that we've talked about quite a bit, engaging that audience. So everything from workshops, creativity workshops, game development, I think nothing would be better than a hackathon for 12-year-olds trying to create a game. So there's those opportunities there for us to get out into the community and to excite the community about the things that we're doing. But more than anything else, again, it's about that imagination piece. So we do want to find some of those things. Just it's a matter of time, effort, all those wonderful things that every entrepreneur is kind of limited by.
Question for you. Take me back to kind of the early days of Kid Rocket. You guys are technically kind of part of Propaganda 3. Is that you and
Myself from a strategy standpoint, and then from a development resource standpoint, we have the development resources from Propaganda 3.
Okay, and then did you and Jason meet somewhere and kind of bring this idea together, or take me back to those early days and how you guys got started, please?
Who here is from the advertising community in Kansas City? Okay, and I've seen a few folks that I recognize too. That's how Jason and I met way back in the day, but I knew nothing about what was swirling in his head.
Very few do.
But you were developing this. Where were you when you were developing this?
I think about 2003, I'd kind of come up with the overall model for Kid Rocket Studios, and this was before, iPhones and iPads, and and initially some of the stories I were trying to create kind of interactive stories, realizing that how kids interact with the stories that they're, how they interact, how they seem like they were demanding more immersive storytelling, and it's still true now. So I was realizing that we had to kind of, as content creators, we had to kind of up the game to try to get and intrigue kids and kind of get them thinking on a different level. So, and now we're still kind of playing catch up with them. We're not determining the landscape now. The kids are determining the landscape now. They're creating their own content,
Is this both of you? This is for both of you. Is the only hat you wear Kid Rocket or shirt? Let me change that question. Is this the only shirt you wear today, Kid Rocket Studios, or do you kind of are involved in some other entities?
Yeah, I'm still kind of straddling responsibilities, so I do still have some responsibilities with Propaganda 3. But this is something, again, since it's kind of an incubated a startup, I spend a lot of time on this. So thinking about robots and crazy chickens. So there's a lot of time there.
Jason?
Yeah, and I'm the senior designer at an ad agency, local ad agency.
Okay, great. I think that's kind of the new economy, is where we're all kind of wearing 3 or 4 different hats or shirts in this case. Who's got another question for us? Toby, you got.
So while he's walking, suggestion, I'm over here. I'm talking while he's walking. So it's crazy when you get a microphone. I love the description that one of your reviews gave to the Kung Fu robot, a motion comic. And to me, that sounds a lot more understandable than that first slide you put up, digital media, something, right? Why not use that? Why not kind of steal that and try to create the category? You guys are motion comics. Or somebody already stolen it?
I'm not sure if it's totally unique to us. If you've looked at the digital comic space, you're going to see Marvel and DC are playing in there quite a bit. And even the ability for folks to go in there and create their own comic books with apps and services like Madefire. So I'm not sure if we've cornered the market on it, but I certainly think that there are limitations within those platforms. I think we have something unique. I think we have a different mechanic on there, but it's, again, kind of riding that edge between, do we want to be known for the product or the app, or do we want to be known for the property and the characters? So if you're sensing that we're of two minds about it, yeah, you're probably correct on that aspect.
So we got a question way in the back.
I am very impressed by what you've developed. I've already recommended it to my daughter for my grandson, who's
awesome.
5.5. But I just would suggest that you get a female on your team, because this seems very boyish, and if you had something more appealing to girls, I don't think these images would be really appealing to girls.
I would definitely appreciate the feedback for sure. And it's interesting when you look at something like, if you've been to Kansas City's Comic-Con or seen the images from the San Diego Comic-Con, there's certainly a lot of opportunity for boys and girls to get involved in things that we think that are boy properties or girl properties. So we hope it has that universal appeal, but we definitely appreciate the feedback.
One final question for you before we let you go, and that is, as a community, what can we do to help you?
So we've got a special thing for everybody here. I can get back to the slide. We'll just do it. We'll just break it. So if you go to kidrocketstudios.com/1millioncups or 1MCKC, you'll see a sign-up form there. I'd love for everybody who's here that has an iPad, we'd love to sign you up to get an exclusive first look at the final version of Kung Fu Robot that's going to be coming out here in probably the next month or so. So if you sign up, give us your email address, you're going to be on there for, we're going to use test app distribution using TestFlight, and you can actually load the comic on there, and you'll be able to peruse the entire thing. So what we'd love is feedback. And tell us how much you love it, tell us how much you hate it, tell us what could be better, or just support us, you know, just be a fan. I think that would help us spread the word of what we're doing.
All right, thank you so much for coming out and presenting today. Well, that concludes our 1 Million Cups for today. Thank you everyone for coming out. We look forward to seeing you all again next Wednesday, same time, same place.